At the movie's start, we observe a woman asking her son to get up. It's time to get up later, so she puts her son in the car and drives them to a different place. Laura is the name of the girl who goes there and meets a man. This is the house owner in which they are planning to reside. Laura later brings her son around the house to show him about. We later learn that the child is unhappy with the situation and that he dislikes the house. He wishes to return to their previous residence. He expresses his desire to return, but Laura informs him that he will be living with her. This is our house later. We see the child reaches a pond while playing. Laura is unsure where her son has gone, so she sets out to find him. She warns her kid that this is a dangerous location and that he should never be there. Later, we observe the child sleeping and Laura is also sleeping on the couch. Laura has a dream in which she sees a monster emerge from the pond. That is pulling the lady inside it. While we observe Laura's son sleeping in a room, meanwhile, he shouts and calls his mother. Laura, who had been having a nightmare, has awoken and rushes toward her son. Her son claims there is a terrifying monster in the window. Laura claims that this is a nightmare she has witnessed. There is no monster in sight and Laura receives a call from her husband. Laura does not want to talk to her husband, and her husband wants to talk to her. Strange happenings begin to happen in the house. The sofa turned as the TV turned on automatically, the sofa has torn and odd marks appeared. Meanwhile, we observe that she gets a new call. It was her mother who called her when she got the call. "Have you told everyone that I've arrived?" Her mom says, "No, I haven't informed anyone but your worried friends." But she screams, "Why did you tell them? And how can you do this to me? As a result, my husband finds out where I am." On the other hand, we observe her son in his room, still terrified. Because of the monster, Laura puts a blanket around her face. She remembers her childhood when she recited a spell and called a ghost. Meanwhile, her grandmother comes and tells her that, "It wasn't as difficult for me as it is difficult for you." Her grandmother asks whether the ghost has arrived yet. She says he only comes in the basement, not here. Laura later calls a doctor and informs him that she may require medication. Her doctor inquires about her location since she doesn't want to reveal her location. Laura is shown going to the owner in the next scene. And she informs him that the kitchen sink is leaking, and the television is set to automatic. The owner tells him that this TV is left by the people who lived here earlier. We are unable to cover the costs of its restoration. We're also not responsible for any damage it causes. The child is still terrified of the monster in the next scene. Meanwhile, he'd wrapped a blanket on his face. The monster who lives in a pond has now entered his room and wants to murder the youngster. Laura was unable to save her child since she was not present. Because it was storm, she went outside. The child was in the blanket and the monster was surrounding the child. The monster snatches him, and the child tries to release him. And he was calling him, but she was outside the house. And she wanted to come inside when she heard the sound. Meanwhile, the room door is discovered to be locked. She wants to open the door but doesn't comprehend how it's locked. She enters the room by breaking down the door. She enters her son's room, who was standing at the door. He was angry and expressed a desire to return to his home. She informs her son that she will not be going any place, everything was all a dream. Laura was having trouble understanding her kid, who had been terrified. This lady now spends time with her son. Her son, on the other hand, was painting and sketching a lady. His mother inquires who this lady is, and he responds that she is the pond lady. She is the person who lives in the pond with whom I have spoken. She is nice and attractive, and I have understood her. I am not afraid of her. You should go to the pond as well. Meanwhile, we notice that Lady Laura refuses to meet her. She instructs her son to lie down. We see her repairing the couch that was automatically damaged in the next scene. Meanwhile, she notices the lady monster and begins to flee after scaring. And she falls into the pond's water as she makes her way inside. When she exited the pool, her dress was soaked, but it dried quickly. Her son, as we can see, was standing right next to her. He inquires of her mother about the pond lady. She becomes terrified and urges her son to go to bed because it is now night. He informs his mother that the lady has arrived, but she refuses to have the pond lady near her son. Her son wants to open the door, but she instructs him not to. Laura takes her son out once the lady enters the house. She becomes afraid, but her son assures her that nothing will happen. Meanwhile, we see that they sleep in their car. When they go to pick up her son from school the next day, when the kids see their teacher, they point at her, and she asks whether his son has teased the kids. They are pointing at her as a result of this, but he claims that he has done nothing wrong. Laura believes I should wait until your school calls with a complaint. When Laura returned home, the owner lady was already examining the house. Laura believes you've come to inspect the drugs, that you have reservations about what I take. And the lady informs you that you believe there is a problem here. But there's no problem because I only offer you a month to live here. Laura is then seen smoking and doing drugs in the next scene. But she's concealed from everyone and using drugs. Her son exits the house and swims in the pool where he had first gone. When he finds out, she runs after her son. Meanwhile, her son claims that I am ready to leave. Later, he visits that lady in the pond. Meanwhile, Laura notices her kid entering the pond. She was calling her son, but her son sinks into the pond. Because the lady has taken him with her and is rushing to his help. After rescuing him, he is brought out of the pond. She becomes agitated, and she resigns from her job. Because they are aware that she consumes alcohol. She later goes to pick up her son from school. Her son was not waiting for her at school this time. She starts looking for her son when the police arrive. She informs the police that my son has gone missing. And everyone begins looking for him. Later, an officer approaches her and informs her that they are unable to locate her son. Because his son died before a year had passed. She had been living in a fantasy world up until now. She wasn't ready to accept that her son had died. The police inquired as to what happened to your son. She walked into the kitchen to take grocery items one day. She believes something has gone wrong with her son. She rushes over to the pond where her kid had sunk in the pond. She brings him out and treats him with CPR. In the meantime, an ambulance arrives and transports him to the hospital. In reality, her son had died, but she claimed that he was cured when she provided him treatment, and she was living in an imagined world. Because she refuses to accept the truth. She now informs the officer that she requires water. And then she goes from there, and after the office closes. She was in the city when she came out and went to that deserted location. The house where she and her kid used to live. She was looking for her kid, who was missing. She notices her kid at the dining table, who replies, "I want to depart from here." Meanwhile, she informs her kid that we will be relocating. You don't have to be concerned about where the child wants to go next. She tells him not to leave her when he gets to the door. Her son pushes her, and the monster lady arrives. Everything in the house began to fall apart, creating a terrible situation. The monster appeared in front of Laura and then disappeared. She now rushes to her son and pleads with him not to leave her. Her son claims that whatever needed to be done has been done. But now I must depart. You are faultless, but I must return to my home. You won't be able to resist me for long, so you'll have to accept reality. She tries to stop him, but her son is more interested in getting away from her. We observe this mom bringing her son near the pond in the next scene. Meanwhile, the lady who wasn't the monster lady emerges from the water. But she was a lovely lady, and her son often complimented her on her appearance. She sees her for the first time and gives her son's hand to her. The lady takes her son into the pond. In the next scene, we see Laura who'd come out from this trauma. She accepted the death of her son and was going back to her house, where she lives earlier in the film.